Okay, so next topic. I want to talk about communities. So, statement of the problem. AOSP is used in many different types of devices, some of which we have mentioned. Most of these groups rather, are developing their own customized versions of AOSP, some of them licensing from Google, some of them not. So consequently, we know for sure there's a large group of developers out there working on AOSP. I did a rough calculation about this. It's somewhere between tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. So it's not a small group of people. But where are they? It's like the Fermi paradox, but for software engineers. Fermi paradox, ask me later. Contrast this with other open source projects that do similar things. So I'm picking on Yocto project here as being a good counterexample. Yocto does essentially the same as what AOSP does, but in a different way. So they have a vibrant and open community. So essentially, I'd like to have the same, please. Community then is more than just free code. It's not a free download. It is sharing, communicating, contributing. That's what I mean. So to elaborate that a little bit then, the problem is the way that AOSP developers work. Everyone is an island. Everyone's working together, working alone on their problem, or in small teams or whatever. Little communication between teams, even in the same company, they frequently don't. Little opportunity to get together with others. Little sense of there being a community at all. So everybody's on their little island. They don't see the other islands around. Even with a telescope, you still can't see the islands across the sea. Just drilling down a little bit on this community thing. Community means sharing information. It's not just downloading stuff to get the maximum benefit out of open source. It's about sharing. It's about asking questions, replying to questions, sharing useful information, and all those things. So I guess you could ask then, why hasn't this happened? If this is such a great idea, why don't we just do it? And I've come to realize that community isn't necessarily something which just happens organically. It needs something, it needs some focus. It needs some kind of leadership to coordinate and promote all this stuff. Why is community a good idea? I've said some of these things already, but I want to focus on the win-win part of this, just to emphasize that community is not a threat to OEMs. So community works, the idea of sharing works both for the individual, because you get to share stuff, you get to recognition within the community, which is a nice thing. We all like to get recognition. It works within the team, because you get, if you're a product manager or a product owner, you get benefit of scale, you get benefit of people becoming better at their jobs. We talked about upstreaming just now. The more of this stuff that can be upstreamed, the better. And again, don't be afraid of upstreaming. Upstreaming is a good idea. Just do more of it. And you know who I'm talking about here. And then at the company level, again, open source is not a threat. It is not stealing your intellectual property, because this is all open source anyhow. It is reducing your exposure to open source by sharing it and sharing the maintenance of all of that. So this is all good stuff, and just a note at the bottom there, I'm talking to you, Google. This applies to you as much as anyone else. So contrast this then with Yocto. So I happen to work quite a lot with Yocto people. I know the Yocto project pretty well. And like I say, fundamentally, Yocto does the same thing as AOSP. How do they do it? Well, it's quite a small community, I should say. There's not a particularly huge number of people there, but they have mail lists. They have people answering those mail lists. If you ask a question on one of the Yocto mail lists, you'll get a response usually within 24 hours, quite often less than that. They are open to patches. We can send patches to the Open Embedded and Yocto people, and they will be very receptive to that. They have Dev Day conferences. They had one yesterday, in fact, in this very building. They have advocates for the community. In particular, I'm talking about Josef Holzmeier, who I'm sure you all know. He does a tremendously good job at promoting the Yocto community. And they are set up. They have an open decision-making process. They have a technical steering committee. All this stuff is made public. So the whole thing is done in the open. Everybody has a part of this. What do we have? So right now, well, from Google, what did Google give us? Not a lot. We have some Google groups, but nobody ever answers any of the mails there. They are basically useless. What about the organic community? So there's a bunch of stuff on Stack Overflow. Quite often when I'm trying to solve a problem to something, I'll Google it and I'll search for it, and it will point me to Stack Overflow. Some of the information in there is good, some of it is not so good. We have a meetup. So I myself run a meetup every 2 months, and that is a means which is somewhat successful to get people to talk together. We have the AOSP developers community, which I think was started by John Stoltz and a bunch of others, and a bunch of people here from Bay Libre and from Linaro and many other places use that as a means of communication. Cool. We have various podcasts. I'm looking at the ADB, the Android Developers Backstage, Chet Haas, and a bunch of other people now. Not specifically AOSP, although they frequently impinge on AOSP-type topics. And we have occasional ad hoc meetings at various conferences, including Plumbers, as we are here right now, but also at the Embedded Linux Conference, Linaro Connect, DroidCon, particularly DroidCon Berlin. If you happen to drop by that, there's a lot of low-level stuff going on there. Slide 2 of 2. When I was researching this, I came across this website, Awesome Android AOSP, which I hadn't come across before. It's basically a very long list of links to almost everything you can imagine. A lot of it is way out of date, but it is worth a look. And then we have various community support around various bits of hardware. So around boards, we have the GlowDroid community, we have the various Raspberry Pi groups, and likewise around custom ROMs and things like the Fairphone, we have groups, each serving those particular communities, but they have the open source ethos to a large extent. It would be great to share more with these guys. So what could we do? I mean, we could do nothing, but that's not really an option in my opinion. There's a bunch of stuff we could do which doesn't actually require a huge amount of effort. So we could set up storage places to store stuff. So right now there's a GitHub page I have. There's the thing that at linaro.org that Amit has set up. We could do some kind of communication channels. So we have the Matrix channel that the Android developers people have. We could do some social media behind this, and then we could do with some online meetings and maybe in-person meetings. Most of this stuff we do already. It's kind of fragmented. I'd like to kind of focus this and bring it all together a little bit. And all of us in this room, we can all become advocates for the idea of an open source Android AOSP community. And maybe we should lobby Google to take us a bit more seriously. So finally then, and hopefully I've got a few minutes left, discussion. I would like to have a discussion with the people in this room and the people not in this room about what we can do about this. So quick fixes we talked about already. There's a bunch of stuff we could do with almost no effort. things that need some effort, well, the leadership thing, it needs somebody, or preferably a group of somebodies, to volunteer to do some stuff. And I guess since I'm standing here, I'm kind of offering my services here. Things that could require substantial effort. So if you to do this properly, we would need to set up a separate organization, a not-for-profit of some kind, get some sponsorship, get some funding, and so on and so on. So there's kind of 3 levels of menu here. So I'm going to open this out to anybody who wants to say anything. What do you think? What can we do? Is this a good idea? Go. Okay, it's kind of quiet.
So I think it's a very good idea, but I think there's 2 big blockers that we cannot really solve at the moment. One is the gatekeeper problem, and you cannot really get code into AOSP unless you have 2 reviewers, as most of us have probably noticed. And it's impossible to get anything past those reviewers that is not in line with Google's ideas. So, for example, if you want to use AOSP in a context that doesn't matter, that doesn't match their vision of where it should be, like, for example, you want to use it in a headless system or whatever, that is not in the plans there, there's no chance whatsoever it will be accepted. And there should really be more open repositories. Ideally, it would return to something more like what was planned in the beginning with the Open Handset Alliance, where there's more different organizations in control of it.
Okay, I mean, that would be nice, but that's not going to happen, and I don't ever expect that to happen. But there's still stuff that's worthwhile doing. We can augment AOSP by creating our own repositories which append to AOSP. So one of the principles, I think, would be never fork AOSP. That's an insane thing to do. But you can work around AOSP. You can add to it in non-invasive ways, and maybe add in some patches.
Chris. So a couple of things. I think you mentioned that already. At the last Plumbers, we started talking about the debboards for Android part. The .lenar.org is incidental. It was easier for us to manage. But the idea was that we could have developers around AOSP that could come together and talk specifically about debboards that support AOSP. So one thing we were able to do with that, and it's like an open invitation if anybody wants to collaborate, we have a Gerrit. So we are able to have an AOSP-style development workflow there. So there is Gerrit, there is GitHub. You can push patches. We can follow the same process as AOSP. That's one. The other part is that we envision with proper support from the community, we could have that as a placeholder for common HALs that can be very useful for people doing almost the same thing, or maybe the same kind of socks.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, let's do it.
And then there is a hash AOSP developers on IRC. That's already there, and I think it's fairly active.
I mean, it's a little bit active, I would say. It could be more active, let's put it that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally agreeing with you in that we need more effort on this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I would like to raise this as being an issue that we can tackle, rather than just saying, hey, we can never win against Google. We can surround Google. We can partition Google. Sorry, that came out wrong.
Hi, I was wondering, and I know the regulations vary by country. I'm most familiar with the regulations for nonprofits in the US, but if you were to be part of an organization in the US, there's a difference between 501c6, that is trade associations, which are which work in the interest of their member companies, and there's 501c3s, which work in the interest of the public good. And I'm just wondering if you see one of those models fitting better for this sort of project.
Geez. I guess it kind of falls between the two. I mean, fundamentally, I'm looking at it from the public good aspect. us being the public, and we have a need to come together in some way. But I can see also a value of this being viewed as a trade association, as a way of expanding it out of just individual developers, and ideally we'd like OEMs to be involved. We'd like to be the SoC vendors, the board vendors. We'd like the whole ecosystem to be involved at some point. So yeah, maybe it's more towards the trade association part of it, but this is a detail that would need to be sorted out if we were to go to the next step.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks. Just making sure it's on the list.
Yeah, got you.
Maybe just a quick side note here. I think this kind of like looks as Google versus the rest of the world, but to Google's credit, Google is actually helping a lot with this. Like, Android is so successful because Google is building awesome tools and investing in a community of application developers, right? Like, we wouldn't be here talking about using in Android and all these other form factors if it wasn't for that. And that community is very successful and will continue to be successful. And I think what's missing is an equivalent community at the platform level. And I would say that maybe in some cases it's not just like Google that didn't help with getting this formed. It's also kind of what you said, those many small islands that don't want to speak to each other. And there are many places where actually nobody differentiates on some aspects. And actually, if we were to work together, I think that would help. So I think it's, yes, we definitely want Google part of this, and that's kind of what we're saying, but we're also saying that we want the rest of you folks to be part of this. And if you were to be part of it, then Google would probably be part of it as well to some degree. So maybe a call to action to us all in the room besides.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to just amplify that. Yeah, at no point do I want to be antagonistic towards Google, even though I may have said a few things by accident just now. I did not mean them. But so, I mean, Google are the good guys here. They produce this huge chunk of code which is used by billions and billions of people, so it's a good thing. Whereas other phone manufacturers don't open source their code, and so we can't make clones of those. So I'm not belittling anything that's done here. I'm just saying that there is a little bit that is missing from the whole jigsaw, and that's the bit that I think we could fill in if we wanted to.
It seems one of your primary users, if you made this happen, would be the alternative firmware communities like Lineage. I'm most familiar with Lineage OS, but there's many of them. And my observation of them is they don't really operate much like a traditional open source and free software project the way we would see it. They just have a totally different community aspect, and the way that they release, the way that they communicate. I mean, I can never, I have to go on XDA forums whenever I have to find a question, which are like impossible to use with all the ads and everything. So I'm wondering if you've thought about how you do that community building, because that's going to be a key piece of your user base. These people who don't really, they want to do open source, they want to do an alternative to Google, because they're supporting devices that Google doesn't support anymore a lot of the times. But they're just such a different community that's so removed from, like, I don't know if there's anybody here from those communities, but I suspect not. They don't come to things like Plumber. So I'm curious if you thought that through, of how to build those bridges that we'll definitely need.
Good point. I mean, I don't have any visibility of those communities. But if anybody, I mean, they would be great people to have on board. I have not investigated how that would happen. But yeah, great idea.
Just a quick point on that. I've been at this conference now for probably 10 years on and off. And if you look at the agenda is very much driven by Google, right? And this is an open source community. Everyone can contribute topics. Why aren't there topics from other folks, right? Android is modified in so many ways. So I think we should probably get our community straight first and try to contribute some more. Try to come here with topics that you struggle with, discuss about them, figure out how we could stop them.
Okay, so I'm out of time here. Just one final thing I'd like to say. If you would like to follow through with this, please contact me directly, or preferably put your email into the Matrix chat for this dev room. And I aim to put together some kind of proposal that we can share amongst ourselves and see if we can take this to the next stage. Thank you all very much.